Have you ever considered this question? Would a person be happy if they never died? Don't rush to answer. Let me put it another way. If you possessed everything a nation has to offer, all its wealth, all its military might, every single life within it, but at the cost of, you can never trust anyone, never be truly loved by anyone, forever alone in a magnificent yet empty palace, counting the swifts outside the window until you can no longer tell what year it is or whether the people around you are living or ghosts. Do you still want this kind of immortality? Welcome to the Fanko Character Think Tank. I'm Fanko. Today, we're going to talk about a book that has been hailed as the greatest novel in any language in the past 50 years. Its author is none other than the man who wrote 100 Years of Solitude, Gabriel García Márquez. Yet this book is even more intense than 100 Years of Solitude. 100 Years of Solitude tells the story of how a family is wiped out in the torrent of time. And this book tells an even more terrifying story. How a person, after gaining the whole world, little by little, it became the loneliest walking corpse in the world. It was called Times, the Autumn of the Patriarch. Gabriel García Márquez once said that when he began writing this book, he had only one image in his mind, a corpse lying in the presidential palace, face down, dressed in military uniform and leather boots without rank insignia, a golden spur gleaming on the left boot. His face had been pecked to pieces by vultures and his body reeked of decay. The palace was littered with cow dung, broken furniture, moths and vultures. The chairs once draped in silk were now soiled by the cows' tongues, and the velvet curtains were riddled with holes from their chewing. But the strangest thing was none of the people gathered around the body dared to utter the words, "He's dead." They examined the details on the body over and over again, looking at his face, the rash under his armpits, his well-maintained hands. Look at that royal ring, the symbol of a nation's sovereign power. It's not that they don't want to confirm it, they dare not confirm it, because this person has died once before. That time, everyone believed he was dead, but then he came back to life. Since then, no one has dared to believe that this president would ever die. He lived for over 100 years and later even reached 200. In this country, a generation was born, grew up, aged, and died while he still lived on. Another generation was born, grew up, aged, and died, yet he remained alive. The elderly passed down the legend that the president will never die to the younger generation, who in turn passed it on to their descendants, until this decaying corpse appeared in the palace. But even then, no one dared to say he was dead. This is a story about power. But the real question it asks is, what happens when someone uses every possible means to keep themselves alive? He killed all those who could pose a threat to him and crafted all the myths about his own immortality. What he ultimately gained, was it truly eternal life? Or is it a torture longer than death? Are you ready? Let us step into this presidential palace permeated with the scent of cow dung and rotting flesh, and take a look at this most absurd dictator in human history. How did I gradually turn myself into a tomb? This President Márquez didn't even give him a name. Throughout the entire novel, he is referred to as the president or the general. He was by no means a chosen one. On the contrary, he started out as nothing more than a warlord. Through years of civil war, he fought his way up with brute force and luck until the British Navy installed him as president. Note that word, installed. He was never someone who climbed to the throne of power through his own ability. He was a pawn placed there by others. Soon enough, the U.S. Marine Corps arrived and occupied the country outright. And this president, he obediently became a puppet. He let the Americans plunder resources on his own soil, loot everywhere, even surrendering the nation's territorial waters. He traded the dignity of an entire nation for the security of a single chair, until a plague broke out, and the Americans, fearing infection, fled in panic. What did they do before leaving? They dismantled the officers' cottages and packed the wood into shipping containers. They uprooted the sky-blue synthetic lawns, rolled them up like carpets, and took them away. Before departing, they ceremoniously awarded the president a medal symbolizing friendship between our two nations. Then they shouted at the top of their lungs, "We're leaving him alone in this filthy brothel. Let's see how he manages without us." That sentence pierced the president's heart like a knife. He saw a brutal truth. If the British and Americans could install him, they could just as easily tear him down. In this world, where the strong prey on the weak, he was nothing but a disposable pawn on the chessboard of great powers. But what terrified him even more was this: if he could ascend to the presidency through foreign backing, then any warlord, any person with real power, could follow the same path and use foreign forces to overthrow him. From that moment on, this fear coiled around him like a venomous snake, and fear is the most faithful catalyst for all atrocities. From that day forward, the president grasped a bloody law of power. Ruthlessness and insatiable greed are the highest qualities required of those who wield power. He decided to strike first, and his blade was first aimed at those old comrades who had fought alongside him. Why? Because he knew all too well these old brothers knew his weaknesses, his vulnerabilities, his path to power. They were the most direct threat. But the president had his methods for killing. He never acted himself. He had subordinates do the dirty work, then cloaked each murder in a respectable lie. One day, the president received a report. A certain general had been bitten by a cat, contracted rabies, and his bodyguards had no choice but to shoot him. The president sighed and expressed regret. Sometime later, another general was crossing a river on horseback when the horse suddenly died, and the general fell into the water and drowned. The president shook his head, lamenting the capriciousness of fate. Then there was a general rumored to have abnormal sexual orientation. One day, he detonated a bomb on his own body. The president was deeply pained, saying it was a personal choice that should be respected. For each general's death, the president held the most solemn funeral, posthumously awarded national honors, and declared them casualties while performing official duties. You see, the deadliest thing about lies isn't how absurd they are, but how they're solemnly packaged as official announcements. When the entire machinery of state endorses a lie, truth becomes a secret. No one dares to speak. After all the killing, only 6 generals remained. The president summoned all 6 to the presidential palace. He prepared a lavish feast: roast turkey and suckling pig and fine wine. He toasted with them, sang the old battlefield songs with them, those melodies that once made their blood boil. These 6 men understood perfectly. They knew the president hadn't invited them to reminisce, so they came prepared. Some drank only from bottles they brought. Others refused alcohol entirely. But García Márquez wrote a chilling detail. In the end, these old comrades fell unconscious one by one. They sang the old songs, with tears streaming down their faces, and under the dual intoxication of alcohol and memories, they lowered their final guard. Night fell. The president's guards silently entered and shot them all. The official story: these men had collectively gone mad in the night and were reluctantly executed by their own bodyguards. Only one general, who hadn't drunk, escaped. But he didn't escape for long. The president sent men to hunt him until gout tortured him to the point where he begged the president for death. Only then did the president mercifully spare his life, not out of compassion, but because a man who must beg you even for death no longer poses any threat, after eliminating the old comrades, the president promoted a new batch of generals. But he soon discovered an even more terrifying problem. These newcomers were more dangerous than the old comrades. Because they had helped him purge the old generals, procured women for him, served as his enforcers, they knew too much. So the president dealt with them even more decisively, even more mercilessly. Kill the old, then the new. Kill the new, bring in another batch, and kill again. At this point, García Márquez reveals a terrifying pattern. The president's fear and suspicion didn't subside with the killing. Instead, they snowballed, growing larger and larger. With each round of killings, a new layer of insecurity formed. And with each new layer of insecurity, he needed to kill even more people. This is the curse of power. It's not a chair you can sit in and rest easy. It's a meat grinder that never stops turning. You think you're controlling it, but it's devouring you. And this grinder was about to turn toward an even more absurd, even more horrifying direction. Having slaughtered all the generals and terrorized everyone, the president still couldn't sleep, because he realized one thing: the secret to his continued survival lay in ensuring everyone else died before him. This logic sounds absurd, but in the world of dictators, it is an iron law. You don't need to be stronger than everyone, you just need to make everyone stronger, then you disappear. To live longer, even to create a legend of immortality, the president did something brilliant. He found a body double. This man's name was Patricio Aragonés. He looked remarkably like the president. Initially, when subordinates discovered someone impersonating the president, they brought him to be executed. But when the president saw this face identical to his own, inspiration struck. This man is too valuable. Keep him alive. He can take the bullet for me when it matters. From then on, Patricio began his long transformation. He imitated the president's walk. The president was born with flat, wide feet that made the ground crunch with each step. Patricio took a wooden mallet and hammered his own feet, one blow after another, until they became flat as well. He ate the president's favorite honey, enjoyed the women the president sent him, and even learned the president's ailments. He developed the same ringing in his ears, the same hernia. Most remarkably, he mastered the president's way of speaking, cryptic, evasive, never answering the question. This manner of speech isn't something ordinary people can imitate, because its essence isn't linguistic skill, but the aura of power itself. I don't need to answer your questions. I only need to make you afraid. Patricio achieved this. He mimicked so perfectly that he could replace the president at public ceremonies, basking in the cheers of the masses, and no one ever saw through the ruse. Of course, the price was steep. The double survived 6 assassination attempts, but the 7th time, his luck ran out. A poisoned arrow struck him. The moment the news spread, the entire country erupted. People scattered pamphlets in the streets, shouting, "Down with the tyrant!" Those who usually kowtowed and hailed, "Long live!" now turned into wild beasts released from cages, calling on all patriots to unite and overthrow the dictator. Even the palace guards gathered in the corridors, reading the pamphlets aloud, and the real president hid in the shadows, coldly watching it all. He watched these people, memorizing every face. Patricio was dying. The president went to care for him alone, saying, "Endure a little longer. Generals of the homeland must sacrifice everything and die like men." But the double's final performance was disappointing. He soiled himself and died. The president arranged a state funeral of the highest honor for the double. He himself hid in the shadows, watching. Those who wept bitterly, those who brought flowers, those who bowed deeply, he was satisfied. But suddenly, a rebel force burst in. They seized the body, dragged it by the feet down the stairs, stormed the palace, looting and smashing. then ran to the square and burned the president's portrait. Meanwhile, in the conference hall, the ministers, generals, archbishops, and foreign ambassadors, who had always bowed before the president, were busy discussing how to divide the spoils. At that moment, the president appeared. The living, breathing president stood before them. Everyone scattered in terror. Only the presidential guard knew the truth. Upon seeing the president, they immediately acted. They slaughtered all those who had celebrated the president's death, specifically captured those who had desecrated the corpse, and subjected them to the punishment of being flayed alive. After news of the president's resurrection spread, rumors of his invincibility and immortality spread like wildfire. More and more people convinced themselves the president is a divine being, forgotten by death itself. Once this myth was established, terror no longer needed an army to maintain it. It became air, became a gene of obedience flowing in everyone's blood. The president loved cockfighting. Every match, he could only win, never lose. The one time his rooster lost, the owner of the winning rooster immediately gifted his champion to the president, then went home and committed suicide. Because he knew to defeat the president was to block his path through life. No obstacles were allowed on this path, not even a rooster. Later, things became absurdly suffocating. The president asked a random passerby on the street, "What time is it?" The passerby immediately replied, "Whatever time you command, sir. You decide. Time obeys you. The rising and setting of the sun are yours to determine. You are no longer human, you are God." But beneath this myth lay the book's darkest children. The president was obsessed with lotteries. He ordered a national public lottery, each time arranging for 3 children under 7 years old to come on stage and draw numbered balls from a bag. Of course, the balls were rigged. The 3 children always drew the coldest feeling ball, with numbers perfectly matching those in the president's hand. The president won every time. He knew these victories were fake, yet still needed this false pleasure to feed his very real vanity. But soon, the president thought of a problem. These children know the secret. 7-year-olds can't keep their mouths shut. What to do? What to do? The president threw the children into prison. Batch after batch of children were locked up. Their parents rioted, so the parents were imprisoned too. Eventually, not a single suitable child could be found anywhere in the country to participate in the lottery. But even so, the president could still issue official statements without batting an eye. All talk of detaining children is shameless lies. He sent for international observers, wined and dined them lavishly, then led them through the empty prisons for a tour. Those people returned and immediately published reports. This country is peaceful and harmonious, enjoying long-term stability. Where did all the children go? The president had the army remove the children from the prisons in the dead of night, stuffed them into sealed cargo trucks, and sent them to remote, uninhabited regions. Then transferred them again and again to tropical rainforests, to the highlands. He sent planes to airdrop ice cream, sweets, and toys all along the route, keeping the children fed, entertained, and distracted, obscuring the truth. Finally, the president issued an order to transport the children to the middle of the sea on barges, then sink the ships with gelignite. Upon hearing this order, even his closest confidants were stunned. The president's expression didn't change. García Márquez didn't describe the scene of the children sinking into the sea. He didn't need to, because the most terrifying atrocities never need bloody images to convey their horror. They only need an order and a face that betrays no emotion. Kill the generals, kill the ministers, kill the children. The president built a towering edifice of power with endless slaughter. But the higher the tower rose, the more hollow and cold it became inside. After all possible threats were eliminated, What awaited this dictator was not peace, but a torture more prolonged than death itself, solitude. Let's continue. Did you think that after killing the generals and children, the president could stop? No. Fear has no concept of enough. It's a bottomless pit. No matter how many corpses you throw in, it will never be filled. You kill 100 people, and you'll think the 101st is also plotting against you. You turn the whole world into a graveyard, and you'll still suspect the bones in the graves are mocking you. The president's suspicions continued to expand. For those generals commanding troops in distant regions, he no longer sent people to kill them directly. That was too obvious. He played a more sinister trick. He secretly had his men mix sand into the gunpowder supplied to the army. Sand-laced gunpowder makes rifles misfire and cannons fail. The combat effectiveness of regional forces instantly collapsed. Morale crumbled, and sure enough, rebellions broke out. The president slammed the table. "See, I told you these people couldn't be trusted." He personally charged into those barracks, and the officers and soldiers who had impulsively rebelled upon seeing the president himself obediently laid down their weapons. No one dared pull the trigger facing that face. Later, in a barracks near the presidential palace, 1,500 soldiers staged a mutiny. This time, all the president's men panicked. 1,500 men. If fighting broke out, even the palace might not hold. But the president alone remained calm. He sent a large barrel of milk to the barracks. The 1,500 soldiers, who had just finished chanting slogans and were filled with fervor, looked at each other. The president sent milk? What did this mean? Appeasement? Surrender? They were skeptical and decided to have someone taste the milk first to check for poison. But when the barrel was opened, the bomb hidden in the milk exploded. The entire barracks was blown sky high. 1,500 lives, and the president's expression didn't change even slightly. In García Márquez's pen, the dictator's killings are no longer events, they are routine. Just as we brush our teeth and wash our faces every morning the president wakes up. He thinks about who should be erased from the world today. He even turned his blade on those closest to him. At one point, the president had killed all the ministers of every government department, leaving only one, the Minister of Defense. This was his closest friend. The two often played dominoes together. In that palace, shrouded by slaughter and fear, dominoes were perhaps the president's last vestige of normal human life. But the words "last friend" in the dictator's dictionary only mean the last one to kill. At an annual celebration, in front of many guests, the president had several exquisite dishes served. The guests picked up their chopsticks, praising the food enthusiastically. Then the president stood up and announced expressionlessly, these dishes were made from the defense minister's corpse. He had been dismembered. The meat on the plates was his flesh. The guests' chopsticks froze mid-air. Some vomited, some collapsed into their chairs. The president said, he plotted treason, had to be killed as a warning to others. No one dared question. No one dared ask, where's the evidence? The trial? Because in this country, the president's mouth is the law. The president's hands are the execution ground. After killing his best friend, the president felt no relief. He found his fear hadn't decreased. Instead, it grew thicker, more viscous, swallowing him like a swamp. He needed to kill more people to quell this fear, but with each additional killing, fear grew another head. This is a track that never reaches the finish line, because the finish line is his own death, and what he fears most is precisely death. How afraid was the president of death? García Márquez wrote a detail that will chill your spine after reading. When the president was already over 100 years old, he visited a fortune teller. The old woman looked at his palm and said calmly, "You will live to 125. The president heard this and fell silent for a moment. Then he stepped forward and strangled the fortune teller with his own hands. Why? Because he couldn't let a second person know when he would die or where he would die. If this information leaked out, it would give everyone who wanted to overthrow him a countdown. García Márquez quietly added a line. This fortune teller was the only life the president ever killed with his own hands. He had killed thousands upon thousands, but those were all carried out by others. Only when facing information about his own death did he act personally. Because the lives of generals, ministers, children he could delegate to others to handle, but his own death he couldn't let anyone else touch, not even this fortune teller who merely spoke the truth. This is the portrait of the dictator's deepest soul. He can disregard anyone's death, but he cannot face his own. All his atrocities, all his schemes, all his myths of immortality ultimately amount to one thing: escape. Desperately fleeing from the palm of death's hand. But the more he fled, the more he discovered he had run into a place more terrifying than death itself. That place was called solitude. At this point, we must ask, the president killed so many people, but what about his own descendants? The book says he had countless mistresses and fathered over 5,000 children, but not one of these 5,000 children inherited his surname. He didn't need heirs, because an heir means someone waiting to succeed you, and between succession and replacement, there's only a single step. The only exception was a son he had with a nun. The moment this baby was born, the president did something only he in the entire world would do. He bestowed upon this infant, still in swaddling clothes, the title of general, and appointed him as regional commander. A baby who couldn't yet speak became a general. Absurd? But not a single person in the country objected, because no one dared defy the president's will, no matter how absurd it became. The nun mother thought she could now rise through her son and become queen. Her ambition and greed began to swell. The president, of course, could not tolerate it. Later, he had both the nun and the baby general assassinated. Over 5,000 children, and he acknowledged none. The only one he acknowledged, he killed with his own hands. The president's mother, however, lived on. She was a completely apolitical old countrywoman who often spoke uncomfortable truths that humiliated the president. She would tell everyone, "My poor son, governing the country, is so busy and exhausting, and he has to worry about assassination every day." She told others, "My son is president in name only, but actually has nothing. He doesn't even have a burial plot for when he dies." End quote. The most devastating moment, she said in front of a diplomatic mission, "If I had known my son would become president, I would have taught him to read and write." A president who had ruled the country for decades was illiterate. This secret was exposed by his own mother at the most formal diplomatic occasion, in the most innocent tone, with a single sentence. Can you imagine the president's expression? But what could he do? He could kill generals, ministers, children, but he couldn't kill his own mother. She was the last soft thread connecting him to this world, even though this thread often embarrassed him. After his mother died, the president placed her body in a coffin and froze it, allowing people to come and pay respects. He summoned the Vatican Pope's envoy to canonize his mother like the great saints in Catholicism. The envoy refused. The president had the envoy arrested and subjected to humiliation, then issued an official statement declaring war on the Vatican. A country declaring war on the center of world Catholicism simply because the Pope wouldn't canonize the president's mother. This isn't madness, this is a person driven to the extremes of solitude, trying to grasp the last remnant of warm memory. He wanted to turn his mother into a saint, essentially trying to keep her by his side forever. Because once his mother was gone too, he truly had no one left in this world. Sometimes the president wanted someone to confide in. He would occasionally sigh to his mother, "Mother, what a wonderful lie the homeland is," but his mother rarely responded. He didn't really expect any response from her, because he knew no one could understand him. He had killed too many, and was feared by too many. Fear is a wall, it blocks all understanding, all closeness, all warmth. In the entire novel, the only person who truly understood him was the body double, Patricio. After Patricio had imitated everything about the president, one day he said to him, "I know how lonely you are. I'm the only one who can feel your pain." He also said something even more piercing. "Once you step down from the presidency, many people will come after you to settle scores, to make you pay in blood." End quote. Later, when Patricio was struck by the poisoned arrow and dying, he advised the president, "When I die, you should die too. Otherwise, it will be too lonely." But the president wouldn't relinquish power. He personally washed the double's body clean and dressed it in his own uniform. He treated this corpse as his own corpse, making the entire nation believe the president himself had died. From that moment, he knew he had become the loneliest person in the entire world. And the only person who understood him had just closed his eyes. Loneliness surged in from all directions. First, it came from his body. The president was born with flat, wide feet that hurt after too much walking. He suffered from chronic tinnitus, for which he kept a roomful of birds in the palace, using their songs to mask the perpetual buzzing in his ears. He had an unspeakable hernia, and every time he touched the bulge on his leg, not only did his body hurt, but shame welled up inside him that he couldn't voice. Loneliness also came from the emptiness after the killings. He killed his old comrades, and from then on, no one sang the old songs of youth with him anymore. He killed batch after batch of ministers, then casually appointed replacements. When the cabinet met again, everyone was present, but not one person dared speak first. All sat lifeless, waiting for him to speak. That awkwardness was more suffocating than emptiness itself. He and the double would wander anxiously through the empty inner chambers of the palace, each trying to walk only on carpets, afraid their footsteps would give them away. Sometimes the two would stand at the window for days on end, gazing at the rainy sky, counting the swifts flying past one by one, counting swifts. A man who wielded all the power of an entire nation, the only pastime he had was standing at the window counting birds. Though he could summon women to bed whenever he wanted, after it was over, melancholy would seize him again without fail. So he would hide alone in a secluded place, singing softly, "Moon of January, look at your window, my sorrow goes to the gallows." A tyrant who killed without mercy, singing a little song about sorrow under the moonlight. This image is cruel to the extreme, and desolate to the extreme. The most unbearable loneliness came from those endless, identical days. In the palace, he didn't even know what season it was or what year. He looked out the window at the same sky, the same rain, listening to the same birdsong every single day. Sometimes, the president himself couldn't even tell whether the person passing outside the window was a living person or a ghost he had killed years ago. Time for him had lost all markers, it became a stagnant pool. The most terrifying loneliness is not when you have no one by your side, but when you can no longer feel time passing. Because once you lose time, you've lost the meaning of your existence. García Márquez used an entire novel to tell us the most absolute power brings the most absolute solitude. The president killed all possible threats, but he also killed all possible companions. He constructed the most solid fortress, but this fortress had only one prisoner himself. Chapter 5. Letitia and Love's Illusion. But just when you think the president will remain in this desolate loneliness until death, García Márquez adds another stroke. The president fell in love with a woman named Leticia Nazareno. This woman was different from all the others. She wasn't a fleeting mistress, nor was she someone who could be discarded at will. She was a nun, pious, pure, and when she first met the president, her eyes held not fear, but compassion. She said to him, "You are the loneliest person in the world." This sentence tore down all the president's defenses in an instant, because for decades, no one had ever looked at him as a person, only as the president. A terrifying symbol, a weapon, a ghost. But Leticia saw through the shell to the real person inside. The president fell in love with her. This love was clumsy, almost absurd. He would stand outside her window at night like a young boy, singing, "Leticia of my misfortune, the stars of dawn will not see me cry." He hoped this woman could fill the void in his heart. He wanted her to save him from that boundless solitude. But Leticia couldn't save him, because no one can save a person whose hands are stained with that much blood. Leticia soon discovered what kind of man she had married, a monster built on corpses and fear. She tried to change him, tried to make him more human. She asked him to learn to read, to civilize the palace, to grant amnesty to political prisoners. But the president refused. He couldn't change, because every reform meant relinquishing power. And power was the only thing keeping him alive, his only reason for existing. One day, Leticia took their young son to the market. She wanted the child to experience normal life. But when people at the market recognized the First Lady, chaos erupted immediately. Someone rushed forward and tore Leticia and her child to pieces on the spot. That scene was extremely cruel. The book describes Leticia and the child's remains being hung on the market fence, like meat hanging at a butcher's stall. When the president received the news, he collapsed. He personally went to collect the remains, piece by piece, then placed them into the coffin with his own hands. He didn't utter a word, didn't shed a tear. He just stood there silently for an entire day and night. This was the only time in the entire book that the president showed emotion, but he still didn't know how to cry. He knew how to kill, how to scheme, how to survive, but he had never learned how to grieve. Later, he gave the order, slaughter everyone at the market, then blow up the entire market. Within a day, thousands were dead. The market was razed to the ground. But Leticia and the child couldn't come back. This was the first time the president realized some things, even absolute power, cannot retrieve. Death can be used to instill fear, but it cannot be used to resurrect love. From then on, the president never loved another person again. He closed the door to his heart completely. He returned to that cold, empty palace, continuing his reign. But this time, even he himself knew the world had completely abandoned him. Chapter 6. The Prophecy of Decline. The president is old. Very, very old. So old, he can't remember how old he is. His teeth have all fallen out. His memory has become muddled. He can't even recognize those around him anymore. But he's still alive, still sitting on that chair, still issuing orders no one obeys anymore. The entire country has begun to rot. Officials openly embezzle. Soldiers refuse to fight. And the people no longer even fear him. Because everyone knows the president is just a walking corpse, a symbol that refuses to die. One day, the president suddenly disappeared. No one knew where he went. Some said he finally died. Others said he fled to a foreign country. Still others said he was imprisoned by his own subordinates. But no one truly cared, because whether he was alive or dead no longer mattered. Later, someone found his body in the palace. He died alone on the floor of his bedroom, surrounded by no one, with nothing in his hands. The book says, when they found him, vultures had already pecked away half his face. This dictator who once held all the power finally became food for birds. They smashed his portraits, burned his uniforms, trampled his medals into the mud. But no one grieved for him. No one remembered who he really was. Because to the very end, no one truly knew him. He was just a symbol, a nightmare, a name. García Márquez wrote at the end of the book, he had been such a powerful man, yet in the end he realized that not a single person had truly loved him. Not a single person would mourn his death. Power can make you invincible, but it cannot make you loved. Power can make you immortal, but it cannot make you escape solitude. This is The Autumn of the Patriarch, a book about power, about fear, about loneliness. It tells us when you gain everything through violence and lies, what you ultimately lose is yourself. When you push everyone away, the loneliest person left is you. So, what is this book really talking about? On the surface, it's about the life of a dictator. But at a deeper level, it's about every single one of us. Because the patriarch's tragedy isn't that he's a bad person, but that he's a person who no longer dares to trust anyone. And each of us in our own lives can become such a person. When you're hurt, you build walls. When you're betrayed, you grow spikes. When you feel the world is unreliable, you choose to rely only on yourself until one day you discover you've pushed everyone away and you've become the loneliest island. García Márquez reminds us through this book, power is not security. Control is not love. True security comes from trust. True warmth comes from connection. If you refuse to trust, refuse to open up, refuse to be vulnerable, then even if you sit on the throne of the world, you are merely sitting in a cage. The patriarch lived for over 100 years, ruled a nation, killed countless people, but in the end, he didn't even have a single person to close his eyes for him when he died. This is the ultimate fate of absolute power, absolute solitude. After reading this book, I hope we all remember one thing. No matter how much you achieve, how much you possess, how high you climb, if there's no one by your side who truly understands you, truly cares for you, then what you possess is nothing but a gorgeous, empty shell. Don't become a patriarch. Don't let fear devour you. Don't let power isolate you. Learn to trust. Learn to love. Learn to be vulnerable in front of those who deserve it. Because only in this way can you truly live, truly connect with this world, truly leave behind traces of being loved when you leave. That's the end of today's story. Thank you for listening. If you found this valuable, please subscribe to our channel. See you next time.